Welcome to part 8 of our series. On any given day, it seems like we witness news stories exposing immorality and unethical behavior. Apparently, no one is exempt, from politicians and entertainers to media elites, and even our high school students. Our behaviors have a ripple effect. Historically, our nation was founded upon biblical standards for moral and ethical behavior. But what about today's scientists? As professionals, are they morally and ethically accountable to higher authorities?
At all of our Ivy League schools for the last 2 decades, we've been teaching all of our young business scholars that ethics are all relative, that there are no absolutes. Now when they go and live relativistic lifestyles, we want to put them behind bars. I said, the very ethic we taught them, they're living out. Now we wonder what's gone wrong. You want to talk about morality without a point of reference? The same thing will happen as what's happened economically today, where there have been no morals behind the scenes and it's payday someday. There is no moral law. There is no absolute. One philosopher of science says ours is an age where ethics has become obsolete. It is superseded by science, deleted by psychology, dismissed as emotive by philosophy. It is drowned in compassion, evaporates into aesthetics, and retreats before relativism. And the usual moral distinctions between good and bad are simply drowned in a maudlin emotion in which we feel more sympathy for the murderer than for the murdered, for the adulterer than for the betrayed, and in which we have actually begun to believe that the real guilty party, the one who somehow caused it all, is the victim and not the perpetrator of the crime.
Is bullying one of those deep-seated, ancient things that you can't unlearn? We do see bullying in other species. I mean, that's pretty apparent.
Aggression, because this is what bullying is, it's a form of aggression. Mm-hmm. Aggression has sort of 2 sources, at least in social animals. One is just the regular garden variety aggression that is part of natural behavior, competition for food, for mates, and then we see that very broadly in the animal kingdom. That aggression and competition is geared towards improving your fitness. There are examples of animal aggression, in primates at least. They're aggression for the sake of aggression. There's something different in the brain of the bullies compared to the peaceful children. It's something different that compels them, that triggers this behavior. Now, what could it be? We come back to the nurture-nature idea. Are they born like that? Are their brains sort of wired up in a different way? Or it's a cultural phenomenon? If you aggrandize and celebrate aggression and competition in a society, especially if you allow them to learn that by expressing aggression and dominating others, you actually have something to gain, then you reinforce that. And I think it will always be this dual mechanism of there's something natural about being aggressive. There's something delicious about being dominating and imposing yourself in a particular situation. But culture has to come and counterbalance that. We don't have a culture of teaching people emotional continence. We potty train our children. We don't potty train emotional continence. We don't teach people to cultivate a social emotional atmosphere that is comfortable for people, and not to endorse bullyism, to teach them that being aggressive, imposing your will, and so it's not going to buy you anything.
Yeah.
If you want to teach them compassion, we cannot also teach them that there are in our society zero-sum games where somebody's loss is your gain, and then you should go for that because it's great to win, and and you're celebrated as a winner, and the loser is
Empty.
forgotten.
Yeah. The people we interviewed thought that we should be colonizing the moon, and that the resources that are there and the microwave transmissions that could be set up could help power Earth and all kinds of things that he had in mind. If we don't claim, meaning the United States doesn't claim the moon as our territory or claim the moon, then wouldn't China or some other country beat us to it?
Well, I think we can use Antarctica as a good example. Antarctica really doesn't have the potential for sustaining 1 billion people or even 1 million people, but it's a great place to do research because it's unique in its research opportunities. The moon likewise has unique research opportunities. And just like the nations of the world have decided to cooperate in taking advantage of those research opportunities, I think the moon has the same potential. Because ultimately, the idea of having an economic benefit from Antarctica or the moon is relatively minuscule, or likewise a military advantage. Mm-hmm. And so I think there's a lot of motivation. Okay, it's primarily the benefit's going to be research. There's no reason why we need to compete and shut everybody else out. Let's work together on this. Mm-hmm. And we work together, we're going to get more research benefit. Mm-hmm. And personally, I'm in favor of that. I think the moon has tremendous potential to push forward scientific research and discovery. Mm-hmm. So, for example, I think we can resolve a big lot of the issues on the origin of life, because the fossils of Earth's first life have been destroyed by Earth's geology. But the first life forms on planet Earth, many of them were transported to the moon by meteoritic means. We can go to the moon and find the pristine fossils of Earth's first life and see who got it right on the origin of life. Mm. And so I think everybody on planet Earth is a vested interest. Mm-hmm. Apollo was trying to find pristine lunar rocks. Let's go back and find the Earth-transported soil.
Wow.
That's just one example.
Yeah.
I mean, I'd love to see a telescope put on the far side of the moon.
Yeah.
As a radio astronomer, it's getting more challenging to do radio astronomy here on Earth because of microwave pollution.
Yeah.
But if you go to the backside of the moon, we're shielded from all that radio noise coming from the Earth.
Wow, that's an interesting thought.
One of my friends was expecting a baby, and the doctor told her that she should have an abortion because the baby was going to have Down syndrome. Mm-hmm. And they had done some common tests. But it turns out that she finally got to the bottom of this, that the test tells you have less than a 1 in 10,000 chance, or you have somewhere around a 1 in 1,000 chance. And so she had gotten the 1 in 1,000 chance. Mm-hmm. Well, so she, of course, didn't abort her baby, and her baby was born perfectly healthy. But the doctor was so convincing that because she had scored positive on this test, that she should have an abortion. So she went home and did her research. What's this test? What does a positive mean? Yeah. And what are the statistics on this thing? And I think people really have to do that for themselves nowadays, because anyone can find this information on the internet. It's very important for high school students. I know that right now the way science is being taught is all about facts and memorizing, but that's not what science really is. Science is really about the methodology of asking a question, doing the right tests and controls to see, okay, it wasn't that, it might be this, and you go forward from there with an educated guess and knowing what it's not and what it might be. But you should not just take the word of a scientist as an expert, because you need to do your own research.
Yeah. Different scientists can have different opinions.
That's right.
Even
That's
about
right
the same
too.
data.
That's exactly right too.
Yeah. Depending on their worldview sometimes.
That's exactly right too. Yeah.
The moral ethics involved, especially in the area of DNA. There's a movement out there to try to ban certain salmon that have been genetically engineered from the supermarkets. We know from past history that sometimes scientists have discovered things that politicians and other people have misused or used in a way that's not good for humanity.
Yeah.
What are we doing to make sure those things don't happen?
Nothing that we eat is not engineered genetically. The farmers in the last 50 years have been taking the tree that produces apples, which are very similar, and they all ripen at the same time. That's the one which is going to multiply, and is going to ignore the others. But as the farmer is selecting for things he wants, similarity of size, maturity at the same time, and things of the sort, he's not focusing on taste. He's not testing for taste. Yeah. So the taste has gone away. So we genetically engineering organisms can be done well for good purposes and can be done badly for good purposes. There are things that we should not be doing, other things that we should be doing. But improving the quality of foods with respect to vitamins, nutritive value, decreasing, say, fat content in some organisms and other things. Those are good for humanity. People are afraid that we are going to introduce some strange thing in our pairs, then it's going to kill me. Because you could do that.
Yeah.
Like we can use nuclear energy to kill people, and we use it that way.
Yeah.
But we can use it also to produce electricity, and the same with anything else that we manipulate.
If DNA research progresses in the way it's going, wouldn't, say, for instance, a family say, we want our son to be an NBA basketball player, and so the genetically engineered...
Now you're talking about engineering human beings.
Right.
Okay.
Right.
So I would say, with respect to eugenics, what is called eugenics,
right.
Good genetics, I think negative eugenics is acceptable. Positive eugenics is not acceptable for many reasons. What I mean by negative eugenics is correcting defective genes. We can do that now for a number of genes, and that avoids disease. Now, trying to engineer better human beings, that's the positive eugenics, we don't know what we want to do and how. We might know how to do some things, but imagine that we learn enough about the genes that control height. So being taller is likely to make a better basketball player. But you start to do it, you lose the advantage.
Yes.
Because now everybody's taller. So the difference that gives the advantage to the tall people now will not exist if they are all tall. This is a trivial example, but more important is that we don't know how to make people more intelligent, have better character or so. So curing diseases yet, trying to make better human beings is not something that we want for moral reasons, but also for genetic reasons, because we don't know how to do it.
So cloning humans is off the table?
Well, you could clone humans. They have not been cloned, contrary to what some people have claimed. But why would you want to clone a human being?
Well, the military might.
Assuming that I want to clone myself, do you know what would happen? It's completely impossible.
It wouldn't be you.
Exactly.
What sort of ethical body governs the use of science as it's discovered? Is it political? Is it money-driven? Or is there an ethical governance of scientific knowledge?
There are in some fields boards that are governmental that create limits. If an example would be, if you work with primates, you can't do just anything you want with primates, right?
Right.
You have to keep them in certain conditions that are humane, and you have to treat them in a certain way, and you can't do things that would essentially be torturing them.
Sure.
And you want to learn a lot, but it's not okay to do just anything you want. And so we need to have those kinds of limits. A daunting thing right now is those limits are not worldwide. So you can have ethical limitations that are imposed in the United States, but all a scientist would have to do is hippity hop over to another nation in the Caribbean and they're just fine.
Yeah.
So we have a lot of work to do, and I'm afraid it's a sad truth that our ethics don't catch up to our technology.
Yeah, because technology is changing so fast.
Yeah, what we can do comes along so fast that we don't ask what we should do.
Yeah, that's a good way to say it.
I think I stole that one from Jurassic Park. But
Did you?
Thank you, Ian Malcolm.
Yeah. We now have 3D bioprinters that can actually model tissue of a living organism so that we can work on that instead of working on the actual organism themselves that it came from. They can take a 3D bioprinter, put it on a matrix of some sort, and then they can test chemicals on there to see if it's going to affect the functioning of the liver. But I guess the next level would be, well, let's manufacture a whole liver and start selling those to people, and then kidneys, and then hearts, and then so on and so forth. So since we're at the threshold of being able to actually make body parts to replace bad ones that people have, what's to keep that from escalating into some sort of a black market issue, or maybe being misused by unscrupulous people, that knowledge? What sort of limitations could be put in place to keep that from happening?
Well, I'm way out of my field in terms of the science and technique you're describing.
Yeah.
But I think it's an excellent question that we all should be asking.
Yeah.
I think we are at this in-between stage where we see that we will probably in the future be able to do things like manufacture tissues and organs, but we can't do it yet.
Yeah.
We're good enough with medical technique to move organs from person to person.
Yeah.
But we don't have our ethical act together in terms of who should be participating in this. So I'm afraid we're already into a rather bad situation where we're exploiting people around the world who are less wealthy for the benefit of those who are wealthy. And this is moving very fast.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's moving in reproductive matters, it's moving in organ transplant.
Yeah.
And I'm really very concerned about where that's going.
Yeah.
And so I think we're not just speculating about the future, we're actually trying to catch up to what we've been doing.
Artificial intelligence is already very useful. It's very good at recognizing faces, for example. I used it as a tool to recognize galaxies. So there are billions of galaxies that we have on record in files of thousands and thousands of images. And we need a way to classify that to get information about the universe. So I wrote a computer program to look at different galaxies and classify them into spiral, elliptical, or barred spiral galaxies. So yeah, it's incredibly useful, and it's finding many applications, especially now. But to put it at the level of a person, it's not quite there yet, right? Like, I use computers all day because my brain is not able to calculate all those numbers, right? I use a supercomputer to calculate the equations on the board, for example, because it's too hard for my brain to do. But yeah, like I said earlier, the brain is just good at assimilating so many different types of information. That's what it's much better at, and it's also good at interpreting and making judgment calls. And there's just many different levels that the brain is good at. So in that sense, yeah, I would say it's more powerful than a computer. If I make a judgment call, there are going to be facts involved, but it's also going to depend on the morality that I have, right? What I view as right and wrong. And your source of right and wrong can be different. For example, the Nazis during World War II, they were trying to improve the human race. So their idea of right and wrong is very different than mine. They were experimenting on people, basically in their eugenics program to try and improve people. My morality is much different. It comes from God. And God says that he loves every person. Every person is worthwhile. He loves every person. So my judgment calls are based on that rather than what they had. And, morality, where does it come from? It's not in a computer. I've never seen a computer give me a moral dilemma or decision.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Who is the gatekeeper for the ethics involved in science?
There are a lot of people looking, honestly. It's not based on ethical oversight as much as practical and monetary oversight, right? I mean, I don't know any independently wealthy scientists. So scientist basically cannot work on anything he wants to. It's just not possible. So practically, you have to go to someone for money, and usually we go to the government. You know, we get grants from the government to do research to try and improve society, improve human lives. So at that point, there's a lot of oversight. To get the money in the first place, you have to write a proposal, and it has to be approved by your peers in science, but also, you know, in general by the government and what they're aiming to fund and what research thrusts that they want to give. So there's already oversight, but about the ethical part of it, I don't know. Not sure.
It seems like there has to be someone outside of science that is concerned about the ethics. I'd hate to think that the ethical decisions lie in the hands of politicians.
Right.
But yet there must be somebody with a moral compass to say that this is the standard we need to adhere to, and if we go beyond this, we need to stop.
It would seem wise to me to have someone outside of science kind of keeping an eye on things. Once you're doing research or doing any kind of work, you can be blinded and kind of only be focused on attaining what you want to attain, because it is difficult, right? It's very difficult, and you're putting a lot of effort into it, and you only see that goal. So yeah, I can definitely see the benefit of having someone outside of science. The problem is that it's usually difficult for them to understand the science.
Yeah, right.
So who should be the oversight? I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't know. Politicians? I don't know.
You know, the physicists that were working on that research that led to the atomic bomb, was that a goal for them?
Yes.
It was. Okay.
Yes. I mean, they were trying to develop that. They could see the potential theoretically, and that's what they were aiming for. They were aiming for it to end the war. You know, that was their goal, and they succeeded, actually. But Oppenheimer later regretted it, if you know.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I can't remember his exact words, but I mean, he lived the rest of his life kind of worried about it, and you know, he was troubled by it. Mm-hmm. So, you know, whether it was good or bad, I mean, it ended the war, but I don't know.
Yeah.
It's a big question. It's too big for me.
Yeah. Some of our viewers might not know who Karl Popper was, but he's sort of the guy that set the rules for science. And one of those rules is falsifiability. Is that still something that scientists use to determine whether or not they're doing good science, is whether or not it's falsifiable?
I would say that most scientists don't really know who Karl Popper is, but he was a philosopher of science. And so his theory of falsifiability is known by people who are familiar with the philosophy of science. But I would say that most scientists don't try to falsify in order to prove something. They try to confirm their theories. So the majority of the experimentation that we do in the laboratory, we have a hypothesis and we're looking to confirm our hypothesis. So the whole concept of falsifiability being the hallmark of scientific discovery and proof, I think it's very disjointed to think of it that way.
Okay. So then why would most scientists say that creationism cannot be taught in school because it's not falsifiable? Or why? In other words, they're saying it's a philosophy, but isn't really origins based on what you've just told us about, you know, whether or not minerals came to life on their own. Isn't that also a philosophy?
There's a phenomenon known as that data always underdetermines the theory or the hypothesis. And so you can have various hypotheses that are looking at the same set of data that are not in agreement with each other. And actually, each of those differing theories would make predictions that would fit within their theory that may not be yet evidenced in the data. And so the predictions that they're making are, in the future, according to our theory, we will observe this type of data if we seek it out. And so again, that's the whole process of looking for confirmation rather than falsifying the theory, right? So you're looking for confirmation. And what often happens, regardless of whether you are in the intelligent design camp doing science or you're in the evolutionary camp doing science, you'll see data, new data, and you won't immediately let that data falsify your theory or confirm your theory. If it confirms your theory, great, then you have nothing to account for. But if it doesn't agree with your theory, hardly anyone on a scientific level totally disregards their theory and starts over, or says, oh, my theory was wrong, therefore that other competing theory must be right. We actually are very good at building and constructing narratives to account for data that doesn't actually fit into our theory the way that we anticipate it's going to fit. And it's interesting to me that since I've been at RTB and I've started to look at some of the various research articles, that evolutionary theory predicts certain things, and as the scientists are actually going and looking for confirmation of that particular element or theory, they will say, what we found was surprising. In other words, it didn't fit with what they were anticipating. And yet that surprising data doesn't cause them to reject their theory, it causes them to restructure or reform their theory or develop a narrative that makes the new data fit within their theory. So although evolutionists might accuse creationism of being unfalsifiable, I think that scientists who would espouse intelligent design or think that creationism is the better explanation for some of the intricacies that we see for the genesis of life, for the genesis of humanity, that they could look at evolutionary theory and say, well, it's also not possible to falsify evolutionary theory because you're able to build these narratives that make data that surprises you fit into your theory now. So, so it's difficult, and that's why I think that it's great for philosophy of science to consider Karl Popper and his idea of falsifiability, but in practicality, that's not the way that we function in a laboratory.
Yeah, okay.
As you can see, without moral standards, decision-making becomes increasingly relativistic. Therefore, society cares more about the individual's feelings than facts. Standards for civilized behavior are becoming more irrelevant. Join us next time as we conclude our interviews on morals and ethics. I'm John Jones. Thanks for watching.
To request your study guide, email us at thoughtmonopoly@gmail.com.